The sun rises for every one of us every single day. I would like to share with you a story, a journey that I started 45 years ago. I would like to invite you to take this journey with me. I'm going to talk to you about two storms and the solution. And let me give you the setting for this journey. This is a picture of my father, Carlton George Bryce. He was a senior engineer at a mining company. And at 16 years of age, I had an admission letter from a local university. I was going to join him in business. He was an engineer at his company, and he's already started his own company, and we were going to be partners. At 39 years of age, he was dead. Started losing weight, his eyes turned yellow, and he was gone. 3 p.m. one Sunday afternoon, looking at his body before me, I made a decision that I would not go back to engineering school, that I would switch to medicine. I had to ask this overwhelming question. Why is it people die prematurely? And this was the reason for this 45-year journey. A personal research project that I gave myself, that I had to answer the question, why is it people die prematurely? Now everybody's trying to answer that question. We have an obesity epidemic. We have coronary artery disease that's going through the roof, high blood pressure. 50% of Americans have high blood pressure. It is estimated that in just 10 years, 2025, 52% of Americans will either have diabetes or prediabetes. There will not be enough nursing homes or dialysis for the tsunami that is coming. And we must find an answer. Well, went to medicine, and it became very clear to me that we can't throw enough lisinopril at this problem. There had to be another answer. So I started looking at these cohort studies, the longevity studies, studies like Okinawa. Harvard University has been following in Okinawa. People are living to 100 years of age with no history of coronary artery disease. And this little island, 1.2 million people, there are over 600 living 100, 110, 115. No evidence of coronary artery disease, no evidence of heart disease. They don't know what mammograms are. They've never heard of prostate cancer. And I started drinking this information. The Adventist Health Study started in the early 50s. It's fascinating. The Adventists is a fantastic group. Within that group, you have those who follow their church's teaching religiously. There are those who kind of follow, and those who follow don't follow at all. And even the ones who don't follow at all, their fat intake is significantly less from the rest of the public because they don't eat shrimps and lobsters and pork, but they do eat a lot of sugar. Fascinating study, the China study, the T. Colin Campbell. Putting all this data together, I came up with what is called the Newsteps. There was so much data. Nutrition, plant-based, food as grown, and as T. Colin Campbell in the Chinese study calls it, whole food, food as grown. Physical activity, exercise. Every time you move, you release something called GLUT4 transporter. I want you to remember that. GLUT4 transporter. This is important because this helps to keep your brain blood sugar supply in a very narrow range. We're going to come back to that. Exercise, water, crucial. It is the lubricant for those who are healthy. Sleep, getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, essential for cellular repair. Early to bed, early to rise is very scientific. Taking time out for rest and recreation, very important. All this came out of the longitudinal studies. Equilibrium. Working with what in medicine we call the diurnal cycle, where your cortisol level is high in the morning, highest at 6 o'clock, getting most of your calories in the first 8 hours of the day. Going to bed early when your growth hormone is surges. These are cycles that are occurring in your body every single day. Early to bed, early to rise. Partnering with a physician is crucial for early detection, preventive studies, getting a critical thinker to work with you, and finally, the stress-resistant personality. So I got this information, and I try to understand it. What happened is, if you give the adult stem cell the proper environment, it changes everything. It keeps you going like the ever-ready battery. 40, 50, 100, 120, you're still going once you give the adult stem cell the proper resources. Now, storm number 1. I titled this The Death Spiral. This is like your cell on a rodeo. A very uncomfortable situation occurring within the cell. I must talk to you about 2 terms before we go any further in the storm. One is glucotoxicity. Gluco, sugar, toxicity, the P word, poison. And lipotoxicity, fat poisoning. This is part of the essence of what's happening within the cell. These words are being bounced around in evidence-based medicine. So let me get to some basic understanding. Cells use glucose if the spike and dip of blood sugar is in a very narrow range. Very important that you understand it. Mary Moore, in her book Organizing the Brain, made it very clear that the brain can only function when the blood sugar fluctuates only in a very narrow range. This is crucial to understand the rest of the spiral. So what's happening inside the cell? You have this erratic rise and fluctuation of glucose, this high fat level. And let me take a moment to get you right into the very beef of this. That horizontal line is that narrow line that I just talked to you about. Well, on the American diet, in the Western diet, high fat, high sugar, when you eat this, there's a huge surge way above 130 of glucose. And when this happens, it damages the nervous tissue, the endocrine, and the cells. And there's one organ I want you to take note of, the hypothalamus. I know you've never heard about it before. The hypothalamus. Ever heard about it? The hypothalamus controls appetite. And this surge damages the function of the hypothalamus. See, people who are 100 pounds overweight and their diet is totally out of control, it's not their fault. It's like a train downhill, runaway without brakes from this damage to the hypothalamus. And this surge also blocks the way we metabolizes fat. And so with this surge, this damage to the body looks at all of this and it says, wow, we're in trouble. So it gets 5 trucks, 5 fire trucks full of insulin. They run to it and they start pouring insulin. And before you know it, there is this bottom out, this crash of blood sugar. And the blood sugar level gets below normal and you become what is called hypoglycemic. This crash is crucial to understanding this death spiral. At this level, you feel tired, fatigued. Then you feel like eating. And there are people doing this 6, 7, 8 times a day. Every time you get this sensation, they put something in their mouth. This is such a serious reaction, so the body gets the sensation that it's under attack. So the body puts out cortisol, epinephrine, to try to stop this death spiral. And this is where most of the chocolate companies make their money. The big coffee houses, this is where they make their money. You might be asking the question, why is it this spiral is now happening for the first time on planet Earth? In the year 1800, we only took in 10 pounds of sugar per person per year. Now, it's anywhere from 135 to 168 pounds of sugar per person per year. That gives you an idea with this death spiral. And so learning all of this from the longitudinal studies, started practicing medicine. I decided to take this information to my patients. At first, they look at me, exercise? Change my diet? Are you talking to me? Less than 3% would make any response at all. So I got this big idea. Why don't I take them all to a hotel one weekend? And maybe I'll get your attention. Funny enough, they came. I'll take 100, 200 of my patients into a hotel. We went to Gaylord, Texas. We went Friday night, and we teach them what happens to your liver when you eat late at night. And then next morning, we gave them a plant-based diet. My success rate went up from 3% to about 10%. And as if I was being guided by this unseen hand, I came up with this idea to do some follow-up programs. I'd see them once a week for 40 days, and then I'd have a graduation at the end of this. Success rate went up from about 10% to about 30%, sometimes 20%, sometimes 40%, but an average of about 30%. I decided, wow, I've discovered the answer to the world's problem. I'm not going to hit the road. Formed a non-profit organization called Newsteps to Health and started to save Texas, save America, and was heading for the world, and then the bottom fell out. After doing this for a few years, I became totally depressed. Majority of the patients who came to the program, patients who came off hospice, patients who were sent home to die, diabetes completely reversed. Those who had an HbA1c, you remember that number, 4.8 to 5.6, which is normal? We had people with HbA1c of 14, blood sugar 400, completely reversed without medication. They got off their insulin, got off their metformin, and they were all going back to this food. I almost gave up. And I decided to answer the question. So I started the journey one more time. And this is when I came up and found the second storm. The storm I entitled the limbic storm. To understand the storm, let me remind you a little bit of how the brain works. This is a clicker that changes the slides. I'm looking at this as a normal stimulus. My eyes goes in, it hits the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe, it's a clicker. Okay? Ah! But for a moment I thought it was the head of a snake. Okay? And this happens, it's a threatening stimulus. No more the stimulus goes to the prefrontal cortex, the cortex, it is diverted to the amygdala. This threatening stimulus functions differently. The threatening stimulus hit the hypothalamus, the amygdala. It functions completely differently. Here, what I just experienced a while ago was fear. Fear of the snake in my hand. Okay, irrational thoughts. Shame, loneliness, guilt, depression, anger. This is the result of a threatening stimulus affecting the amygdala. This creates a very, very uncomfortable situation from the plan. It is here that this thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. When you get this sensation going on, this discomfort, you're constantly breathing rapidly, or you freeze, you do nothing, or there's this constant autonomic response or the stress response. And I want you to notice the word hypothalamus once more, where this limbic storm inhibits once more the hypothalamus, and you have this runaway obesity. They term this the hijacking of the amygdala. And I started to ask myself, yes, Errol, you were able to solve storm number 1. Got these patients off hospice, reverse coronary artery disease, patients who were supposed to go home and die, who couldn't walk from the front of your office to the back because of shortness of breath and chest pain, now walking 2 miles. These individuals are being drawn to this because of how do you find this? I started searching. I remember a paper I published in the early 90s on fibromyalgia, which I published at the American College of Physicians, where I recognized that people with fibromyalgia, most of them, 80%, had childhood trauma. Somewhere in about 1800, somewhere around in the 90s, 1,700 people were studied by CDC and Kaiser Permanente. And they came up with what called the ACE score, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And they recognized that this trauma is what bringing people back. See, what happens is that the body has no reaction, no response to long-term stress. It has no answer. A short-term stress, yes, the body can deal with it. A child that goes up on a slide about 10 feet high, going down, the eyes open up, your heart's racing, you get to the bottom of the slide, and what happens is you start smiling, the stress is over. The adrenaline goes down, the cortisol level goes down, you're back to normal. But what happens when you're on a slide that's 10 miles high every single day, and there is absolutely no way of getting off the slide? You go through the death spiral, and you literally die. The limbic storm. How do you stop this? Under this stressful situation, the body produces what is called interleukins, pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And this is where you start dying. It's happening inside all of us. The way you think, what you eat, is producing cytokines that are either killing you or making you live. Either making you die prematurely or allow you to go on forever. You have to find a way to deal with this. And so this unseen hand led me to Harvard University, to this building, the Simcoe building, which is about a block from the entrance to Massachusetts General Hospital. I went up there, 4th floor, and this little gentleman got up. His name was Herbert Benson. And Herbert Benson stood up and presented what he called relaxation response. You take 3 very slow, very deep, very silent breaths. And at the end of it, you say, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Just doing that, it went from a pro-inflammatory to an anti-inflammatory status. You stop making cytokines that were killing you to cytokines that were healing you. Unbelievable. But Herbert Benson missed one very important point that Alandushman got. Alandushman, I don't think he even understood what he was doing. But he looked at prisoners in San Francisco. Most of them would go back to prison once they get out. But if somebody would come by with unconditional love, if they could see in someone they can trust, they were able to stop the limbic storm, and these guys would not go to prison. The early 90s, Calvert Esseltine, Dean Ornish, took patients with terminal coronary artery disease, met with them once every 2 weeks, put them on a plant-based diet, and in meeting with them, every single one completely reversed the coronary artery disease. For the first time, this was shown in the history of medicine. Unconditional love. I don't think Caldwell picked it up, and Dean completely missed it. Houston, Texas, Judge Mark Carter, a veteran himself, recognized that a number of vets were coming by, and instead of giving them sentences of 10 years, 7 years for the crimes they were committing, many of them on drugs, cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, he decided to organize a 2-year program of counseling. And I like this statement. He said, "I will be patient, and I will give you time to change back to the person you were." Unconditional love. And so, friends, we have to step out of the silo. The silo of spirituality, evidence-based medicine, and positive psychology, where there's no interaction with these. One set of information in evidence-based medicine is never translated to the spirituality realm or to positive psychology. We have to step out of this silo effect to come to this answer to stop premature death. Evidence-based medicine, yes, they understood the first storm, but totally oblivious to the second storm. The guys in psychology, you must move beyond CPT. There is storm number 1 that you must address. And the folks in the spiritual world, you must address these 2 storms. It is where the broken work with the broken to become unbroken. This is where the money is. And in summary, it is a plant-based diet. Whole food, as T. Colin Campbell calls it, food as grown. This is the only way to keep the blood sugar on a very normal range. As well, if you look at physical activity as the next factor in this, your physical activity releases GLUT, remember this? GLUT4 transporter. This is important to keep your blood sugar at a normal level. And then storm number 2. To quell this, you need focused thinking, relaxation response. You need to be able to introduce meditation where you constantly rehearse these issues. And finally, it must be done in a context where someone can partner with you in unconditional love. You have to get next to somebody and show them this love. They must see in you a trust that they have not seen anywhere else. With this, the storm can be quieted. Where do we go from here? Very briefly. The National Institute of Health, Dr. Nora Volkoff, with a budget of $1 billion a year, Nora, maybe we have something here. Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Congress, the Affordable Care Act. Maybe we can formulate policies to wrap our heads around this. Folks with money like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and my friend Rick Bertel. This is where you take a business plan to make it happen. And in the spiritual world, this is where you get growth. The broken, helping the broken to become unbroken. Thank you so much for coming along with this journey. And the sun rises every morning for every one of us every day. Thank you.